The White Sox have signed every draft pick from last week's draft, so now let's break down how Chicago did in adding desperately needed talent with my guest on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, a contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press, and thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform. The White Sox have signed all 20 of their draft picks, and since everyone is now in the fold, I think that's actually the best time to analyze how the team did in the draft, because that's crucial to the team's future success. And I got the always brilliant Elijah Evans from JustBaseball.com and FutureSox.net to break down the draft in the first two segments, and then I want to pivot to what current prospects could still fill some holes in the lineup once veterans are dealt at the trade deadline. And Elijah, thank you for joining me. I know you did a ton of rounds last week after the draft, and you were covering the All-Star break, but I always feel like it's best to actually analyze a draft once somebody, once you get everybody in the fold, because, hey, they're now officially with the team instead of there's a potential, there's still the potential that, some of these prep guys could go to college.
Yeah, we just saw, the Pittsburgh Pirates second round pick who didn't just announce he's going to college all of a sudden when the expectation was that he was going to sign today. So you're completely right there. It's always good to kind of let these guys settle in. From what I've heard, all the White Sox draft picks actually got to Arizona yesterday and today, or at least some of the higher round guys did. So everybody signed the contracts and are getting under work. And I know that, some of the college guys are going to get out to affiliates here in a week or two from now.
All right, so did the White Sox just draft the combination of Ozzie Smith, Cal Ripken, and Derek Jeter? Because the scouting reports make Billy Carlson sound very, very exciting, obviously.
Yeah, Billy Carlson too is super exciting, man. I think that from everything that we've heard, he was the White Sox target at number 10. They wanted a prep guy. They wanted a legit, projectable hitter in that first round spot, and ideally a high school hitter, and that's Billy Carlson. And on top of that, Billy Carlson from most scouts and most people you talk to is the best defensive shortstop in the draft, high school or college regardless, which is huge because the White Sox have a lot of pieces in the system that are making their way up within the infield core. But I think one area you could point out and look at is that a lot of these guys that are the shortstops in the system profile a bit better at short or a bit better at second or third, pardon me. But that's not Billy Carlson. Billy Carlson will be a shortstop. If he doesn't make it into be a big league star, it will be because of the bat. He is going to be a defensive, high-end shortstop, and it's already clear at his young age.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned Ozzie Smith first, because I did read scouting reports that he's one of the best defensive shortstops that they've seen in for a while. But if the bat can catch up, you're talking about having a great defensive shortstop and a stud hitter in that mold. So that's why I was like, let's reach for the ceiling of those three. I mean, that would be great if you could combine like those three talents into one shortstop. And it sounds like that's what they got with Billy Carlson. Jaden Fauske, I know you talked to him. Sounds like a combination of, first of all, taking a swing at a guy with a high ceiling while using good talent discovery since he was on the area code team.
Yeah, 100%. This is the guy who's been on the White Sox radar for a couple years now, with Jim Thome's son at Nazareth Academy right now, and Jaden being there the past couple years with Thome's kid and with Thome helping out with the team. Like, you know that was kind of an instant connection there. But I didn't think he was getting to the White Sox at 44, and that's what's really interesting about Fauske is, they had their eye on him for quite some time, but with him, he easily could have gone in that late 20s, early 30s range, and that's the type of money they ended up getting him. But once he got to around pick 30, the White Sox were able to say, hey, look, we can give you the money of essentially this pick, and if you go even later, you're going to get less money. We're going to pay you like you're a late first-round pick, and they did that. They paid him $800,000 over the slot value at the 44th pick. So, Fauske was a guy that they wanted for a while, and it was going to be a hard situation to get him because he's better than the 44th pick by a significant margin. And they made it happen, and they overpaid for it. And at the end of the day, like I'm all for paying what you have to get your first few targets. And I think that it seems like the White Sox, their target at the first pick was Billy Carlson, and their target at the second pick was Jaden Fauske. And yeah, it took a little money over the slot, but they made it happen.
Yeah, and I remember I had you on the show last year talking about the draft, and there you had some questions on that, especially with the process. Yeah. But it looks like this year they definitely had a very sound process, and a process that a lot of good big league teams use. Draft up the middle, draft prep guys early, pay the price that it takes in your first 1 through 5 to get that talent in. I mean, it just seems like this was an excellent draft from a process standpoint, and that's basically what you can judge it on right now, because at the end of the day, all Mike Shirley can do is and his scouting staff can do is just find these guys.
Yeah, you try to bring the right guys in, and the way you develop them from there, and then what happens from there is a whole different conversation, right? You don't know how these guys are going to pan out. Obviously, there's going to be inherent risk when 3 of your top 4 picks and your 3 large overslot picks are high school guys. That comes with some risk. There's always a chance that high school picks, no matter how good they are going to completely flop and are going to fizzle out by AA, right? That does happen. We've seen it happen many times. The best organizations get bitten by high school prospects, right? But for a team that is, setting sights on 2027 and beyond, if you've got 3 high school guys that you think are, very legit talents you can develop over the next couple seasons, you take those swings, man. You take those swings. And I think that they did exactly that with those 2. And then with Landon Hodge, the 4th rounder, who from everything, it seems like he's a legit catcher. So, you got a shortstop, a center fielder, and a catcher who are all strong defensively at their respective spots, are going to be very projectable at the plate. And you've got a couple years to just develop them and take your time and see what happens there.
And then they also doubled back in the 3rd round with Kyle, I'm going to probably butcher his name, Lodise, another shortstop. Yeah, taken very high. But why was it so smart for the Sox to double back again and take another shortstop? Basically, I'm trying to hint. Can you tell the audience why it's always so important to just double up on shortstops, even though he might not stick at short?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm drafting as a major league team, I'm taking 4 to 5 shortstops and 20 picks, because the talent it takes and the consistency it takes to be a decent to high level shortstop means you can play anywhere in the infield at that point, and often in the outfield too. We've seen plenty of shortstops shift out into a corner outfield spot or into center field even and be fine. You look at guys like Tommy Edman. There's plenty of other examples in the bigs. O'Neal Cruz went into center field, right? So if you're a solid defensive shortstop, you will typically have these skills and athleticism and just baseball's talent to be able to play in most positions, if not any. So starting there at a position like a shortstop, and a Kyle Lodise who played shortstop at a high level in college for multiple years, for him, he might not be the best shortstop. He profiles as around an average shortstop. But if as he gets older and as he moves up the ranks, isn't a great shortstop, he can be a very good second baseman or potentially third baseman from there. So it just gives you a lot of versatility. You start with the positional value. The shortstops and center fielders are there's a reason why you look at the draft, and I think it was 11 shortstops taken in the 1st round this year, including the comp picks. There's a reason for that, and that, I think, from the White Sox perspective, getting the well-rounded college shortstop who is not necessarily a high excitement ceiling guy in a Kyle Lodise, but a quality player all around, a good hit tool, pretty decent approach. He's going to be able to play a solid infield spot wherever you want to put him in the infield. And he can just be someone who can move fairly quickly, but just give you a solid floor when you're balancing that out with 3 high ceiling high school guys.
All right, so I want to dive into some of the later round picks with Elijah after the break, specifically some of the pitchers they took and a high school shortstop that maybe could have been a future higher pick had he gone to college. And we're going to discuss that after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Day Hue. And so is this hat I'm wearing. For White Sox fans like me, this one hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere between. And I love my hats, and I'm really digging this hat. I love it. It's so comfortable. And, I got a big old bald spot. My hairline keeps thinning, but this cap is so comfortable and so good at covering it up. And I love the clean look, and I love how I can still rock my White Sox colors without getting that look of disdain from those annoying Cub fans. And it's not just hats. Check out their split shade gloves. So cool looking, made for the golf course, or the perfect gift for the fan who has everything. And if I can actually get out on the course this summer, you best believe I'm trying this glove out. And right now you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Going to make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you're not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. And I'm here with Elijah Evans of Just Baseball and FutureSox.net. And Elijah, where can we always find your great content?
You can find me on the old Twitter at ElijahEV8, JustBaseball.com. Now the call-up for prospect stuff for all Major League prospects, and then Future Sox for White Sox-specific prospect podcasts.
And you're now the director of operations, the kingpin, the czar. You're helping Aram basically become Just Baseball. Basically have it be a media baseball empire. Is that the new gig?
Yeah, that is the goal here. CEO, head of operations for Just Baseball, which is awesome. I've been with them for a couple of years, and now we're really continuing to elevate things, adding some podcasts to the network, doing some new things, working on some other further expansion of the Just Baseball network. So it's exciting stuff. I'm excited.
Yeah. I know you guys got Herb Lawrence doing a White Sox / Cubs podcast with got the guy that he's with on there. So I know you guys got plenty of content. So it's awesome that you guys are going to be basically taking over the baseball world soon. And hopefully you guys, can push some, good narratives on like where ESPN makes it seem like it's going to be almost impossible to trade Luis Robert Jr. But we're going to talk about that in the third segment. Getting back to the draft. So the White Sox just going to collect all the giant pitchers because they took 2 6'9" guys, Gabe Davis and Daniel Wright. And I guess I want to ask that because, they keep taking these giant pitchers, but the problem with it is that's a lot of limbs to match up mechanically with, your mechanics there and having it all sync up. That there's a lot of risk there.
Yeah, for sure. Gabe Davis is the one of note here, Wright being a graduate signing, so more of a money saver pick there. But Gabe Davis is a really interesting prospect. He's a big dude, so there's obviously going to be some risk there, as you mentioned there. But there's a lot to like. He really gets low release, and just really gets a lot of extension. Gets down the mound. Fastball's been up to 99. You've got a really kind of sharp, deep slider that he's got there that can be up to 90 miles an hour. And he's just it's a lot of stuff. He hasn't had the best of results, and there's still kind of that long-term, it's going to take some time for him. Not a college guy who's going to necessarily just progress very quickly, I don't think. But there's a lot to like and a lot to dream on with the Gabe Davis. I think that, he ended up signing for above the slot values at that pick. And I think there's a reason. I think there's, some serious talent to dream on there. It's going to take some time for him, but I definitely like the upside swing there with the first arm. If you don't take an arm until the 5th round, you might as well take a guy that could be very good if things click.
And especially it sounds like they're kind of targeting both of these guys being relievers, and I kind of like that. And I do
Davis. I think might be a starter, which is interesting because it's he could be a reliever. He could shift that direction, but I think they're going to try him as a starter at first, which for a 6'9" guy is going to be fascinating to see kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, and I mean, I like that you mentioned the extension. I mean, Brian Bannister loves his extension, and I guess that's why they're also just loading up on every single giant there. Matthew Boynton or Boynton, I'm probably butchering his name there too, suddenly made it known that he would actually sign, and that's why the White Sox drafted him. Is this a potential, where they talk about, hey, we stole a first-round pick by getting a guy like him, like George Wolcott, that type of stuff? Is that one of those things, or was this guy like, hey, probably no more than maybe a 3rd or 4th round that they were able to get in the 11th round?
Yeah, probably somewhere in between. I think it's more of the second, more of the latter probably in this situation because he is a, 19 going on 20-year-old coming out of high school. So he was an older high school pick. And then he was going to A&M though, so that's obviously pulling an A&M commitment in the 11th round is great. He didn't get a huge overslot signing bonus. He definitely got more money than the rest of the 11 to 20 round guys. So it is a notable signing there for sure. It's definitely the value of a guy who, he sounded like they were in negotiations with him at the 5th pick or the 5th round pick. And then he ends up there was a breakthrough with the negotiation there. He says, okay, I will sign in the 11th when they gave him the overslot at that spot. So it's an interesting situation. I don't think it's definitely not like a huge first round late draft steal, but with that said, I do think there's a lot of people that are pretty high on Botton's ability to stick at shortstop and the upside he could provide offensively. So definitely a stronger value than the 11th round tag may indicate, but also not somebody that I'm necessarily looking at as a star amongst some of the other guys in this class.
Yeah, I want to get that take because, for example, I know George Wolcott. I mean, they were talking about him potentially being a first round pick had he not reclassified. And the thing that I don't get is why are some of these guys kind of going a little bit older as high school? You'd think if you're basketball, obviously there's nothing wrong with being the older guy, or even in football, but baseball, it's like obviously, unless you're fit, you haven't physically matured, you want to think that you would actually want to be younger, so that way you can have more time on your plate, whether you're going to college or you're going to go to the pros.
Yeah, typically that is a thing, but I think with some guys it just comes down to like they might just not be at that level yet, and it takes a little bit longer for them to get there. He didn't commit to A&M till a little bit later on in his journey, so it's an interesting situation. It all depends on the player, but I do think he would have been a draft eligible sophomore, so what's interesting there is he could have gone to college and got drafted at essentially the same time as most of the juniors because he would have been eligible as a sophomore. But instead, so then he would have kind of been even to the playing field there. But instead, he goes with the high school route, which is why he wouldn't have even been in consideration for an earlier round pick. So it's all just trade offs there, and all depends on the player. Everybody's got to go the route they go.
All right. So anyone taken late in the draft that has a shot of actually getting to the show, and even better, could they maybe draft a Kerry Carpenter type player? I'm not, pitcher or hitter. I'm just bringing up because how Kerry Carpenter, he was a 19th round pick, and now he's been a living nightmare for the White Sox.
That's very true. There's a couple guys that I think I'm looking at here. Ellie Brown in the 12th round after Boughton is an outfielder from Mercer University. Small school guy, but definitely grades out very well in center field defensively, which is always kind of a good start of a baseline for a college outfielder. If you know you have a guy who can stick in center field, plus speed, can really move well out there. Seems like he was kind of just finding his groove offensively this past year in college, so seems like there's kind of a little more to tap into there on the offensive side for a guy who is a legit center fielder. Rylan Galvin, the 13th, is a catcher from Texas. Definitely more of a boomer bust. Whiffs a lot. Big swing, but the EVs are ridiculous. He's posted like 116, 117 max exit velocities. So really good natural pop there, but very unlikely to hit consistently enough, depending on how that goes. And then another one to mention is the last round pick, the 20th rounder, Andrew Sentlinger from Virginia Tech, is someone who I've heard, the injury issues have been a thing, but the fastball is extremely good. A lot of vert on it. Gets a really good release angle from it. So it seems like it's, when he's been healthy, it looks like he could be a legit plus fastball guy with some breaking balls that have shown flashes at time, but he never kind of had the time of health to put it together. So from what I've heard, Andrew Settlinger, being among those background guys, they take, I think, what was it, 5 of the last 7 picks were college pitchers. It seems like he might be one of the most exciting of that group.
All right, and I just got to ask too, is there some organizational rule that they have to take a guy from Coastal Carolina? It just seems like they love that Coastal Carolina, which, hey, don't get me wrong, the Chancellors, if you're going to go from a program outside of, the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC, I would go with Coastal Carolina, but it just seems like they just have this rule. They got to get a Coastal Carolina guy.
My borderline favorite prospect in the system right now in Sam Antonaccio was the Coastal guy last year, so I'm not complaining. If it keeps going that direction and players keep developing the way he's developing, I'm all for it.
All right. Well, I want to dive into some prospects I would love to see get called up after the trade deadline. So let's see if our expert here, Elijah, agrees with me or just thinks, hey, you are way off base, Todd, and that is after the break. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Monarch Money has helped my wife and I stay on the same page when it comes to managing our finances. I also love it because it's helping me save up for retirement because, I would like to retire before I turn, say, 75. And it's great for helping me track my 401k and Roth IRA portfolio. My wife loves it because it makes budgeting so easy and less stressful. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. And again, I'm here with Elijah Evans of JustBaseball.com and FutureSox.net. And JustBaseball.com, I believe, is going to be taking over the baseball content world. I mean, I think that's the goal, right? That you and Aram and everybody in there, because you guys are doing great work.
I appreciate it, man. We're doing our best here, one thing at a time, right?
All right. And you still host the podcast on Future Sox, right?
Yeah, of course. We're always talking White Sox prospects. We're just getting into the 30th ranked prospect you may never have heard of, but we're keeping tabs on. So
All right, man. I mean, I'm giving you're being gracious with your time. I want to make sure that you have time to plug your stuff as well.
I appreciate that,
All
man.
right. So, Elijah, my hope for is after Adrian Hauser is likely traded that we don't see Mike Clevenger or Bryce Wilson again or Noah Syndergaard. I would rather see a young arm get a shot, much like, they did last year with Kai Bush and Sean Burks. So is it crazy to think Tanner McDougal or Shane Murphy could get the call up as starters?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think in terms of Tanner McDougal, so I'll start by saying McDougal is, the breakout prospect of the system this year. It's not even close. He has gone from a guy who we always knew had talent to, a clear top 10 prospect in the system in my eyes right now, and a guy who, I think will very much be in play for a 2026 rotation spot in Chicago. With that said, where his innings are at right now, he's already being limited a little bit. If he debuts, it's going to be out of the bullpen. I could almost guarantee. And if it's as a starter, it'll be kind of as an opener. There's no chance in my mind that he makes more than 2 to 3 inning spurts for the White Sox. I do think he gets a September call up though, which I mean, if it's August, great, but definitely by September, I think he ends up getting to Chicago. I just think it's probably a bullpen role or maybe kind of an opener role.
All right. And then, the thing that I was kind of hoping for was maybe does Noah Schultz get called up? But it sounds like that knee might prevent him, from, getting the call up to the show. Are they going to be very cautious with him? Is it long term? Is it going to be a shutdown? Or is it just more of, hey, everything looks okay?
I think it's a short-term thing. I don't think it's a big deal. But at the same time, given that he was struggling a bit in AAA and he's dealing with a little bit of a bang-up, I don't think there's a reason to push it. With a McDougal, right, you're coming off of a really good stretch here. You're riding the momentum. So if you want to give him a taste of the bigs, great. With Schultz, like if he gets up in September and he makes a couple appearances out of the bullpen, it wouldn't shock me. But I also don't think there's a need to. I think a guy like that, you got to keep him healthy. You got to keep him rolling with the innings. And if he comes into spring training and he looks, like the best version of himself, then you can put him straight into the roster for all I care. I don't think a few appearances in September really changes much for Schultz's trajectory.
So you're saying I got to brace to see Mike Clevenger eat innings in August
I
and
don't think
September?
it's Mike Clevenger. I really don't. I don't think it's Clevenger. I'm hoping not. I think there's some other guys that definitely can be. I just think it's probably not those two. But I think there's at least some other guys who are fun. Yohendris Gomez is a guy who he had a few major league appearances earlier this season for the Dodgers, and then got DFA'd there. Comes over, has been really good in Charlotte. 25-year-old flyer, right? But like I'd way rather see a 25-year-old flyer who's been dominating in Charlotte than I would a Clevenger or a Syndergaard or whatever. So I think Gomez is one guy that could be up. I also think we're going to get a lot of fun bullpen arms. I think you're going to get the likes of Jairo Iriarte and Wilkerman Gonzalez, who we've seen a little bit of so far, but both those guys are kind of former, high-end prospects who have shifted into bullpen roles and have both really started to thrive in the bullpen. Peyton Pillette's another one. I think all three of those guys should be getting bullpen innings here down the stretch. The White Sox bullpen, man, I mean, it's already been a little better, and it's sneaky, might be really fun here in the last month or two, and then going into next year with all the young guys that are there now.
Does Jacob Gonzalez get a look, or any position players if by some chance, for example, the White Sox do decide to surprise folks and trade Lenyn Sosa? I mean, I know there was that brief rumor that
Right.
maybe the Yankees were kicking the tires on Sosa, but any position players you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it depends on moving guys. If they, I don't think they're getting anything for Rojas at this point. So if you get a Rojas DFA, that opens up a spot. If you get Sosa moved potentially, that opens up a spot. So there could be one or two spots. I think more of where you're going to see it is the outfield. I know we got a little tiny taste of it, but Will Robertson, who was acquired recently, I do think we'll get some outfield innings once you move, potentially a Slater, a Tauchman, who am I thinking? Who am I missing? Mike, if it's
Michael A.
Robert
Taylor.
here, it's that Michael A. Taylor, exactly. I think Will Robertson will get some innings in the outfield, so that is one position player to keep an eye on there. In the infield, I think we could see Bryan Ramos again. I would like to see Bryan Ramos again. He's had a really hot week or two here coming into the break. Bryan Ramos is someone who I was pretty high on 2 years ago, and then even last year when he's making his debut, got rushed up a little last year in my opinion, and then the injuries set him back. He kind of just got his whole second half of the year derailed last year, and then was dealing with an injury at the beginning of this year. Finally, he looks like he's kind of really finding his groove here the past month or so in Charlotte. So I think Ramos would probably be the first infielder to get a real shot here, if he's going to get that chance. If it goes that direction where you move on from a Rojas or a Sosa. I also think that either Corey Lee or Blake Sable might come up as a catcher. I don't know about you, but I'm all for bringing up a third catcher purely for the sake of getting Teal and Caro in the game every day together. It's ridiculous to me that they're not playing, at least 5 to 6 days a week each. I don't care if you're clogging a DH spot. Those are two pieces of the future, and regardless of position, they need to be in the lineup more frequently.
And how disappointed are you where even like Will Venable, and I know I did a show on this, like they're kind of resistant to actually like trying Kyle Teal on the outfield. I mean, this season's lost. Why not try some things, and they briefly tried it, and I think they got bit by hey, we have to get the DH spot in terms of having them both in the lineup every day. But why aren't they embracing things like this? You're not going anywhere this year.
Yeah, I think that if they want to try Kyle Teal at different positions, they're probably going to wait for the offseason, which I'm not saying I agree with, but I think that's probably the logic is like if we want to move him around, let's get him a full offseason to take reps in the outfield or take reps at first base. First base, though, is the place where like I see it as a no-brainer because that's not like the outfield where it takes another level and there's more injury risk, right? Like first base is the lowest injury risk in baseball, and it's a position that I think Teal could handle fine. And that's not like there's anybody playing first base. I mean, yeah, when you have Carlson at third, then you're putting Vargas at first. That's a little bit of a different dynamic. But the days where Vargas is playing third and Carlson is playing short, I don't need to see Lenine Sosa at first base. I don't need to see, a Ryan Noda or even a Tim Elko. Like, I'd rather have those innings go to a Kyle Teal and test him out at first base and see how that works. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but like at the end of the day, like the next 2 months, you should be getting Teal, Caro, Baldwin, Meidroth, Montgomery into your lineup as many days as possible. And you're not trying to burn them out, but you're trying to get these young players 5-6 days a week to really adjust to big league pitching.
Does it feel like the guys that they have this young core right now is going to project more to be the supporting cast to the potential superstars like, Braden Montgomery and Billy Carlson? Because it feels like those are the guys that are the superstars. And maybe Colson, if he does keep hitting, he hit a home run last night because we're recording
today.
that. Yeah. Well, we're recording. That's why. Yeah.
The day before as well. So
yes. And he's done that. He's hitting 2 home runs. I mean, there's the potential there. But it just feels like a lot of these guys are giving off vibes that they're going to be regulars, but they might just be the supporting cast, there's nothing wrong with that. Am I just totally off base on my theory there?
I don't think that's inaccurate. I think it could be somewhere in between. I do think that there is a world where, a Teal, a Caro, a Colson Montgomery all become above average. Do I see any of them being, all-stars every year? Probably not. But I think they still can kind of be more than what we've seen. And I also think that, like, you've seen some pretty good signs out of those guys so far. And I do see, reason to believe they can be better than an average player. But yeah, I don't think that's inaccurate. I think that at some point this team's going to have to spend a little bit to get a bat or two. I think, on the pitching side, like every time I've come on and talked to you, I've said how the pitching, from an organizational standpoint, is much ahead of the hitting, right? You've got a number of guys in the bullpen and in the starting core and in each level of the minor leagues, from McDougal to Schultz to Hagen to Christian Opper, right? Like even if you go further down too, that are going to be legit arms. On the hitting side, like they're gonna have to add a bat or two, and I think they will. I honestly do. I know people have gotten so, they're never gonna spend, and that's gotten ingrained into the brains of White Sox fans. But I do believe with the Ishbia, coming in and all this different stuff coming in, the new money potentially flowing in, you're gonna have to spend on a big bat or two at some point or another. I hope at least one comes this offseason. I see no reason for it not to, given how little money is on the books. There's no money on the books. So if these guys are all supporting guys and are all kind of your average to above average players, they have the money, very much have the money to spend on a big bat or two. And if they do that, you're looking at a much better lineup. If they sign, nothing but veteran 1-year deals again this offseason, that's going to feel pretty disappointing, honestly, because I do think that they have the clear reasoning and the timeline to bring in a big bat or two this winter.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or your listener podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with a discussion on if the Cubs-Sox rivalry will ever reach the levels it did in the aughts. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with Elijah Evans of Future Sox and JustBaseball.com. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Jubber, at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. And Elijah, where can we always find your great stuff again?
You can find me at ElijahEV8 on Twitter. Always appreciate joining the show. And then JustBaseball.com, the Call Up Podcast, Future Sox Podcast, all that stuff. But thanks, Todd. It's always fun talking some White Sox.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And everybody have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.